Let this session be a way that we affirm the goodness and wholeness of all of creation, with special emphasis on those who are oppressed. We begin our program as we begin all water programs with the land acknowledgement. We are on indigenous land here in Silver Spring, Maryland, the traditional and contemporary land of the Piscataway and Anacostan peoples who were the original stewards of this territory. We acknowledge the trauma that is deeply embedded in the foundation of this country and the harm done to indigenous communities, communities of color, as well as other immigrants. Water programs are aimed at supporting and igniting social change, including social justice for people on whose land we sit. Please take a moment to reflect on the indigenous people on whose land you sit and how we can support and make reparations for harm done. Thank you. I want to review our format. First, I'll introduce our speaker, and then Clarafrancie will offer some brief reflections on unsung heroines of the civil rights movement. Then we'll break into small groups for a short time of conversation and use the remainder of the hour for questions and answers and discussion with Clarafrancie and with one another. We will close officially at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. We'll leave the Zoom link open for those who wish to continue the conversation, but we honor your time and your other commitments by ending in a timely way at 3. The video of this session will be on our website at www.waterwomensalliance.org, along with brief notes that we will take. And Clarafrancie has very kindly agreed to have the PowerPoint made available, so you won't even need to take notes. You can enjoy your tea or your lunch or whatever time it is for you. But please take time at the moment to mute your audio, and we'll invite you back in for conversation very shortly. Let me introduce my friend Clarafrancie. Clarafrancie Cromer Sowers is a Doctor of Ministry student at Wesley Theological Seminary in the program on trauma, moral injury, and Christian life. She earned her Master's of Divinity from Wesley with a concentration in urban ministry, and she has a Master's in clinical mental health counseling from Capella University. She's ordained as a bivocational clergy member at the historic Metropolitan Baptist Church, serving in their counseling service and as the ministry lead for HIV/AIDS. Clarafrancie engages in mental health counseling with expertise in substance abuse and various mental health disorders, including trauma, anxiety, grief and loss, marital and family counseling, and children, ADHD, and adult ADD. Her day job, those are her hobbies. Her day job is with the federal government in IT. So you begin to get the idea that this is a very busy and productive woman whose focus is on healing and service. She's a Chi Sigma Iota International and Professional Honor Society member for counseling students, counseling educators, and professional counselors. Not to mention that Clarafrancie is a retired senior master sergeant and U.S. Air Force veteran with 25 years of dedicated service in the field of aerospace medicine. She came to work at Water more than a decade ago as part of the Wesley Seminary practice in ministry and mission. Happily for us, she has never left. She's the clergy companion for our current Wesley PM&M, that's practice in ministry and mission, sort of the practicum component of theological education. She's the clergy companion for our current PM&M student, Pamela Miller, and she's been involved in the same capacity with other Wesley students. Just imagine that when she was with us, she had a full-time government job, a monthly obligation as an Air Force reservist, multiple family and community and church commitments. I still don't know how she did it, nor when she slept. But I do know that she embraced her work with a wonderful spirit and achieved great success in her many endeavors. Her graduation from Wesley was a time of joy for all of us, as will be her reception of the Doctorate of Ministry. Today, she brings a report of her time in Alabama for a civil rights pilgrimage, when she explored the important women whose identities and deeds were often obscured. Clarafrancie brings them alive for us with her own commitment to justice. Welcome to you, Clarafrancie. We're all ears to learn from and with you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mary. I would like to share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Fine.
Oh, great. Okay. So this work, my doctorate of ministry pilgrimage, actually started on August 6, 2023, where myself and 14 other cohort members met in Birmingham one day after the brawl in Montgomery. At that time, when we first met, we didn't know, because we were all coming from various parts of the country. And I would like to also lift up that as we go through the slides, the civil rights movement is very, very dear to my heart, because my mother grew up in Prattville, Alabama, and my dad grew up in Georgia. So they're a product of what we would consider the Great Migration, where a lot of African Americans moved from the South to up north to get better positions. So my parents were very, very made us keenly aware of what was happening in the civil rights movement. And then I found out through a great dear friend of mine that I was actually born 2 days before Bloody Sunday. And on the 8th of August, I actually walked across the Edmund Pettus Bridge there in Selma. So this presentation is near and dear to my heart, because when I realized through my research that a lot of women who were keenly aware and keenly organizers in the civil rights movement, we don't know much about them, because at that time, gender, race, and class was, a significant factor, but a lot of the leaders in the movement felt it was better for the male clergy to be in the forefront than the women who did most of the organization in the background. So my first screen is the Unsung Heroines of the Civil Rights Movement. And I don't know, is that moving? Mary doesn't seem, is the second page up for you guys?
It's not at the moment.
Okay. So let me back here, because I have 2 screens. There we go.
Yeah, fine.
So this presentation is dedicated to the women who sacrificed, organized, and placed themselves in harm's way during the civil rights era, but their leadership was often unnoticed because they were women. And the first woman I'd like to highlight is Ella Josephine Baker. She was a Renaissance architect of the civil rights movement, as well as the national director for the Young Negroes Cooperative League. She was publicity director for the National Negro Congress, but she also established the SCLC and the Student Nonviolence Committee. She was a field secretary for the NAACP, and her life's principles dealt with human dignity, liberty of control of one's body, and organizing powerful weapons against justice in Black people. Joanne Gibson Robinson. She was the president of the Women's Political Council. And the Women's Political Council was very important because the Women's Political Council was the political organization that was started in Montgomery, and they were instrumental in institutionalized racism there in Montgomery, and they led the way. Now, she originally is a professor at Alabama State College at that time, which is now Alabama State University there in Montgomery. She was the one when Rosa Parks was jailed after not giving up her seat in Montgomery. She found out about it because she was a part of the Montgomery Improvement Association, which eventually been led by Dr. King. She ran off 50,000 flyers the night before for her and the students to distribute to get the word out that they were going to start the boycott. The only reason why some of the white citizens of Montgomery found out about the boycott starting on that Monday, December 5th, was because one of the domestic workers gave the flyer to her employer, and that's how the information got out ahead of time. But she was very instrumental in circulating, her and her students, those 50,000 flyers the night before the boycott began. Simta Poncetta Clark. She was an educator and civil rights activist who started in North Carolina. She was very instrumental in paying equality to Blacks and white teachers in South Carolina. And she also modeled the Citizens Education Program that Rosa Parks took 2 weeks before she decided to not give up her seat. And she conducted those workshops. And I want to note that when Rosa Parks attended her class, Rosa Parks was the third woman who was actually jailed, incarcerated, because she refused to give up her seat. But she was chosen because the other two women, the organization felt that their backgrounds weren't be conducive to go national. So let's thank Simta Clark for her willingness to educate and hold these literacy and voting rights classes, and helped in her workshops. When she started in South Carolina, she actually lost her job because of the workshops. So, which availed her to have more time to go national with her training. The Sisters of Joseph of Conduit. So we know these women, and I found it even through Water, as the Sisters of Selma. A lot of these women, 6 women, came from the Midwest on behalf of the church leadership when they heard what happened in Selma as regard of Bloody Sunday, and not the African Americans there not being allowed to go across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And 6 women came to Selma to march. Only one woman, because of the back and forth, only one woman, sister, actually completed the 54-mile journey. But it'd be interesting to note that this documentary is still available out on the internet for you to be able to see. It's a very, very good documentary. Viola Luzo. I am originally born in Detroit, Michigan, and I found out about Viola through my mom. And she was a member of the Detroit chapter of the NAACP. She worked on the transportation services going back and forth to Montgomery, and also providing food for the marchers. And she was killed by the KKK for her civil rights efforts. She and another young man she was transporting, who was 19 years of age, in her efforts. Helen O'Neill Gray. She was arrested and jailed as a freedom rider, and she attended Jackson State University in Mississippi. She taught the SNCC Freedom School in Mississippi, and she also chaired Charles Cox, the Jackson Nonviolent Movement. She assisted lawyers for Constitutional Defense Committee in Shreveport, Louisiana, and she was, before her death, she was a professor of African-American literature and composition at Wilberforce. One of the reasons why I highlighted Helen was a lot of the students were very actively involved in the civil rights movement. And a lot of them actually left school to do it full time before they eventually came back and pursued their degrees. And a lot of the women that you'll find at the end when the bibliography is published, you will find out that a lot of them went on to academia and became very successful. Reverend Dr. Prithia Hall. Now, Reverend Hall grew up in a Baptist family who had she was a third generation preacher, which, if you understand Southern Baptists, that was kind of, she was a trailblazer, because as we know, and still today in the Southern Baptist Convention, a lot of them did not believe in women in pastoral leadership roles. But what was important by Dr. Prithia Hall was she was the first person who had the "I had a dream" that Dr. King used for the March on Washington. That was actually her dream that he mentioned in his famous speech. And how that came about was he had heard Prithia talk about the imagery of her dream, and Mahalia Jackson, during the speech, told him, "Hey, Martin, don't forget about the dream." And so he left script and talked about the dream. But Reverend Dr. Prithia Hall, she dedicated her life to social justice, and she was responsible for training women at Princeton Theological Seminary, which is really known today as one of the paramount theological schools that a lot of African American theologians attend to this day. Reverend Dr. Polly Murray. Polly Murray, without Polly Murray, we would not have Brown versus the Board of Education, that landmark act that talked about separate and equal schools. She was a lawyer, she was a civil rights activist, and a gender equality in the Episcopal priest. She was denied entry into Harvard Law School because they didn't accept women. And so she was a graduate student, and she eventually obtained her LLM in 1944. She was a co-organization of the National Organization for Women. She served on the Presidential Commission by John F. Kennedy on the status of women, and she was the first African-American woman to be ordained priest in the Episcopal Church. She has a wonderful book called I Am Jane Crow, which is a very, very good read. I recommend everyone to get her book. Judy Richardson. Judy Richardson joined the Students for Democratic Society as a freshman at Swarthmore College. She was a SNCC member in Mississippi. She co-founded the Drum and Speaker bookstore in Washington, D.C. She's a filmmaker, and she was the executive producer and education director for Eyes on the Prize, documentary that can be seen on PBS on the civil rights movement. One of the things I want to highlight that Judy Richardson said was, even though women were considered capable for being organizers, very few women were elected to executive committee members on SCLC or SNCC. And she also emphasized that the fact that it was irrelevant for women to act or demand that they lead in the civil rights movement, even though a lot of them were strong and capable of leading. Okay, and we see a lot of that today, where gender, race, and class, are significant factors of the civil rights movement, but also how are we leading in today? And we see that very loudly a lot right now, even in our political climate. Victoria Jackson Gray Adams. She was also a part of SNCC, a part of Voters' Rights Advocate, who were Refuge for Young Women. She, as well as, and we'll find out in the next slide, with Fannie Lou Hamer, as well as Myrlie Evers, were very instrumental in the civil rights movement there in Mississippi. She was one of the founders of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And she and Fannie Lou Hamer, as you hear Fannie Lou Hamer say in her speech during the Democratic Convention in New Jersey, 1964, that she's just sick and tired of being sick and tired. Victoria ran for Senate in Mississippi under the Mississippi Democratic Party National Party ticket. And Fannie Lou Hamer. Fannie Lou Hamer was a voters' rights activist in Mississippi. And she spoke, as I said, in 1964 during the Democratic Convention there in New Jersey, asking, "Is this America?" citing the racial injustice of how Blacks suffer violence, atrocities, and lynchings in Mississippi. She's been shot, she had been jailed, and severely beaten for voicing her opinions about our separate and unequal political system in her home state of Mississippi. And the beatings was kind of a result of her untimely death in 1977. Gloria Richardson Dandridge. Gloria Richardson Dandridge was very instrumental in leading the Grassroots Nonviolence Act committee, calling out racism and lingering segregational policy here in Cambridge, Maryland. As you know, Cambridge, Maryland was the home of Harriet Tubman. Her father owned a general store there in the community, and they, but they were, what we see, some of the police brutality we see now with Black Lives Matter, a lot of those same things happen in her neighborhood there in Cambridge. And for 5 or 6 years, she was instrumental in helping to change the Charter of Public Accommodation and Ordinances there in Cambridge, Maryland. And so these are the women who I highlighted, and this is the bibliography, as Mary stated, that will be out, and available on WATER's website for you to talk about and to review, because it is, a lot of these references are worthwhile researching and going through for yourself. There are several other publications that I can provide to WATER regarding a lot of women in the civil rights movement. There's a great book on the civil rights struggle for women in North Carolina, Mississippi, and other parts of the United States. But as I was going through my presentation and reviewing, I thought I knew a lot about the women in the civil rights movement, and not until I did the research did I realize that it was just a lot more information that was out there that I wasn't aware of, and that there was no way for a lot of things to occur and a lot of organizations to happen without these women and many other women that catapulted the civil rights movement today, and also was a forefront on a lot of women now being politically involved and doing more social justice work in the public square. That concludes this presentation. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, Clarafrancie, I want to just say we are in your debt for this presentation. You have brought us a great deal of information and acquainted us with people. You've just given us a snippet of some very powerful and important historical figures. I, for one, was not aware of some of these people. I knew some of the names, but I was not aware. And I can assure you that you have piqued my interest, my dear. And you know when my interest is piqued, get out of the way.
Yeah.
You know what that means.
Yeah.
I think this is just terrific, and I thank you so kindly. I know you've asked for questions. If there were a question of clarification, we could take it now, but I would suggest, if with your permission, that we go into small groups and have a few minutes to chat with each other. Does anybody have a question of clarification before we do that? Something that would keep them from discussing appropriately. But you have provided us with material that we will use and use and use. And Janet, did you have a question?
Yeah, just quickly, is she writing a book, putting all of this information together? Or
well, is she Clarafrancie? Is she writing a book? She's doing a doctorate of ministry thesis, so I don't know, Clarafrancie.
It's been suggested by more than one person, so thank you, Janet, for that question.
Go for it. I'd love to read your book. I can't keep it all in my head.
Yes.
Well, we do have this valuable PowerPoint, and we will make sure that that is with the notes for this session, and you'll be able to use it yourself, as well as the bibliography. Now, did anybody do what I did, which was to screen share that, screen shoot that bibliography? So I got it right here on my computer. So you got to be quick. You got to be quick when these things happen. Take a screenshot and keep it on your computer. But we'll make sure you get it. Yes, Jean Christensen, you are excused, but we're glad you were here, representing not only yourself but all of the Sisters of Mercy, and just taking this information. Jean's going to be doing a presentation for us later on in the year, so we'll be looking forward to that in the new year, actually. I would suggest that we move into small groups for a bit. This is particularly important for groups like WATER, which are predominantly in this situation, not exclusively by any means, but predominantly white women, to do the kind of conversation that needs to take place so that we get ourselves up to speed on this and we take a lesson from this and we learn from these women who are our four sisters. So the two questions that I want to raise based on Clarafrancie's presentation are, first, how would the world be different if these women's voices had been taken seriously in the civil rights movement? How would the world be different? We'll put these questions in the chat in your small groups. And this, how would the world be different if these women, I mean, doesn't it gall you to think that these women were not in the leadership, were not publicly acknowledged and made the leaders that they were? I mean, the notion that I have a dream was a woman's notion. I mean, how galling is that to be 72 years old and not know that? I mean, I'm just disgusted by my world when I realize these things. And secondly, who else is forgotten in the work that we do or the work we're acquainted with for human progress toward justice? Who else is forgotten, and how is that work slowed?
Mm-hmm.
Who else is forgotten in the work we do, such that human progress toward justice is slowed? Because that's really the issue, isn't it? It's not just the issue of fairness and justice and respect, but it's also the bigger picture of how progress is slowed for everybody when this sort of thing goes on. Mm-hmm. So with that, and with deep thanks and a bow to you, Clarafrancie, I ask Lisa to put us in small groups just for 10, 12 minutes, and then we'll come back and have an opportunity to talk with you more in depth on this. Well, it sounds like y'all had good discussions, and I did too. I want to thank my group. We were closed out before I had a chance to thank my folks. So let us all thank one another for those conversations. I want to open the floor now for further conversation with Clarafrancie and one another. Again, thanking her for this very stimulating presentation. Don't you agree that it got us off to a running start and opened our eyes and our hearts and our minds to many things that we need to be considering? Mm-hmm. So the floor is open. If you will use the button at the bottom, the reaction button on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, and put your hand up if you would like to speak. You can see mine is up, and that moves me, at least on my screen, to the top of the queue, and then lower your hand when you're finished. Please make your comment brief. Tell us your name, and we will hear from as many people as we can before I close us out, and then we will continue during the Zoom, the free Zoom time after, but we will finish at 3 as I promised. So the floor is open, with great thanks to Clarafrancie, and I have my own questions, which I may just save if other people have plenty. So go right ahead. Priscilla Snyder will be first.
Oh, okay. A comment and a question. There is a great film on Pauli Murray, and I think we might have seen it on Netflix. It's her being interviewed, as well as sort of a document. I guess it is a documentary about all the incredible things that she has done. I recommend it.
Yes.
The question I have for you, Clarice, is do you talk much about the women who sang? I'm thinking of Bernice Reagan Johnson and I think they called them the Freedom Fighters, the group that did a lot of music during the civil rights movement, because I think they were a very powerful force as well within the movement.
I'm not as familiar with them. I do have the documentary Eye on the Prize. I bought it a couple of years ago through PBS. I am more familiar with, being from Detroit, a lot of the music of Aretha Franklin, because she helped fund a lot of people, bailing people out of jail, and providing funds in order to put forth some of the work that was happening with Dr. King and with the SCLC. So I am building that library. I have a lot of the songs, of the freedom songs, that I have in my video library outside of my office.
I apologize for not calling you by your proper name.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah,
Clarafrancie. Yeah, it's a mouthful. But
so is Priscilla. So
yeah. So, but
Hello.
I love the music of those times, and being raised in the Baptist tradition. A lot of those hymns and songs we sing as a part of our tradition.
Yeah.
So it kind of carries me back when I hear them.
Just a footnote to your comment about the movie. It's My Name is Polly Murray, and you can see it on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
And Polly Murray is an enormously important figure, and especially the whole question now of whether she was actually a trans person, that she really saw herself as or themselves as a person who may in fact have been in a gender other than the one that they felt best represented them. And that's a very interesting topic. And yeah, it's a great film. It's a great film. We'll go to Kitty, and then to Kitty Madden in Nicaragua, and then to Diane New here in the Water Office.
No, I don't know if this was the film you were alluding to, but about the sisters. There's a documentary about Sister Antona Ebo, the Black sister. She was the only Black sister there at Selma. So I don't know if you're aware of that or not, but I could find it. I just actually had it in front of me a couple of days ago, but I'm in this place of sorting and recycling, and I was thinking maybe that's something I should send to you, Mary, or maybe you have it there at the water.
If you want to send us a reference,
Yeah.
if you want to send us a reference, we will put several things into the notes, and then
Okay. I'm
so
sure I will find it.
Even just send us the title of the movie. I have heard of it. I don't know it, but if you send us the title, we can track it down from there.
He was a good friend of John Lewis too, so that was another piece of that. And thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Best of luck.
Diane, you were next.
Yes, I'm going to tap into the Water Resource Center. Sweet Honey in the Rock, I think, is the group that someone was referring to. And, they're DC homegrown. We grew up around here going to all their concerts. Bernice Reagan Johnson was the founder, director, etc. And this is On the Journey. And of course, they have the Fannie Lou Hamer song and all the civil rights song. They could really do one with all of these new names that you've given us, Clarafrancie.
Yes.
Thank you. I also pulled from the Water Library the Life of Polly Murray, Jane Crow. So there's a good book that is on the resource here that I think is the resource for the movie, actually. And I Googled when you named her, Kitty, Mary Antona Ebo, and just to tell you that she was an American nun, hospital administrator, and civil rights activist. That's on her Wikipedia. She was the first American woman to head a Catholic hospital, and is known for marching with Martin Luther King in Selma in '65. She was born in 24 and died in 2017. I'm aware, I kept underlining the dates of these women, and they really all are contemporaries of ours. It's amazing. Well, of course, civil rights movement is, but I mean, when they died, I was aware of those connections. I think I told you this at one point, Clarafrancie, 2 of the Sisters of Providence that I grew up with were in the Selma March. One of them was my biology teacher in college, Sister Mary Jean. And so that, if we can get some connections like that with students, whatever the issue is, it really comes alive in a new way. So thank you, Clarafrancie, for raising up all these women.
I want to say that Yale University has a Polly Murray Center, if you're ever in the New Haven area.
Didn't they name a dorm for her at Yale? Don't I
Yes.
remember too? There's a
Yes.
dorm and there's a
Yes.
the Pauli Murray House is in North Carolina, and our friends from the Center for Women in Ministry in the South are very active in the Pauli Murray project in the Raleigh-Durham area. Mary Jelinek, you'd be next.
Hi, this is again to follow up on Sister Antona Ebo. She recently died, as Diane said, but do you know Sister Patty Chappelle, who's in Washington, D.C.? I think she was a friend of hers. And if you'd like to talk to Sister Patty, she'd be one person who has that direct line. She's not dead, but she was good friends with some of these people. And I think she would love to talk to you. Mary, if you don't have Patty's email address, I can send it. Because Clarafrancie, you could be talking to these people.
Yeah.
Send it, and I think we do have it in our system. She's a sister of Notre Dame de Namur, and I think she was in leadership there at one point. And Clarafrancie, that's an excellent connection for you. What a great name to raise up, Mary.
Elizabeth Kate O'Neill, she was the woman who transcribed the letter to the Birmingham jail. She lives here in Silver Spring. And we got an opportunity to talk to her on our last day there in Birmingham. And she said, Dr. King's lawyer for 3 days would visit him. And Dr. King wrote that letter to the Birmingham jail on old newspaper and slips of paper that was in his cell. And his lawyer would bring it back. And then she had the task of organizing it and typing it. And it is she said it was a 25-page document. Now, can you imagine? And she says, Dr. King did not have very good penmanship. So can you imagine her taking slips of paper and trying to put them together, transcribe them and put them together? And that's how we got the letter of the Birmingham jail, from the Birmingham jail to this woman who's in our backyard here in Silver Spring.
Amazing. Yes, Mary Jelinek again, go ahead.
Yeah, just to follow up earlier, I also know a woman who was a member of CORE who was married to a man who was a freedom writer. He was the first Black judge in New York State, George Bundy Smith, but Aileen Smith is still alive, and I think she would love to talk too. So.
And she'd have her story to tell.
She was a member of CORE. Yeah, she's got a tremendous story. And her husband rode the first bus after the bombings of the buses. So they've got tremendous stories to share. And I think she'd be very, very eager to talk to somebody about her experience.
That's a great idea. Yeah, we're getting this book written for you, Clarafrancie.
Yeah, I see.
Chapters are lined up now.
Mary, send that link for Aileen Smith over as well, if you would.
Yeah, so any materials you'd like us to socialize on the basis of this conversation, just send to us in the next day at Water, and we'll get it out in the notes. Anybody else with
one other thought I had is we're talking about all this hidden figures. I mean, this is, you've opened it up in this way. Thank you.
I wanted to just push it a little bit, Clarafrancie, and as we teach our children about the still unfinished business of civil rights, how can we incorporate more and more women, people like Barbara Jordan and Barbara Lee and Dorothy Haight and Bell Hooks and activists and intellectuals, and even our own womanist colleagues like the late great Dr. Katie Geneva Cann, blessed memory, and Emily Towns. And what do you have a sense of how we can get some of this into the curricula of not just religious but secular? I mean, these people are continue to make, but to be seen as part of this movement, not just in terms of their own states where they represent it or whatever, but to see their connection with this. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I know through Water being the exposure, but also bringing it back to the seminaries, but also, like I said, from church, a lot of my education comes from conversations we're having here and building. But the main thing is to make sure that we tell our story. A lot of the younger generation doesn't know, other than, people want to say, why do we have Black History Month? You know, what, you know, and I'm like, okay, you have Black History Month because it was Negro History Week between Booker T. Washington, you know, and W. Du Bois's birthday that expanded. And so that's why it's February, not because it's the shortest month. It's because it was these two leaders' thought, and their birthdays were bookends, and then they just expanded it, you know. And so that's why we have, you know, African American History Month. But yes, you know, telling more of the stories. You know, one of the women in my church, Reverend Brenda Gerton Mitchell, she worked with Dr. Dorothy Height, and she says every time she turned around, Dorothy was like, because she was the counsel for them, she was pulling her to different, you know, events and stuff, and try to get her to make those connections and get the information out. And so I think forums like we have here at Water, but we have to toot our own horn also, and toot the horn of these women. I mean, you know, you guys telling me about, you know, I got that little book that she's hard to get on Katie Cannon, and being a member of the Women's Leadership Conference before she passed, you know. But a lot of my sisters in ministry, even though we're only 100 miles from Richmond, they still don't know about her work. And even Mary, when I tell the story that you have about Katie, you know, her speaking. So we have to get that information out. And a lot of it for me is pushing the seminary and pushing, you know, my colleagues to talk more and have these forums so we could spread the word and understand the shoulders that we stand on.
Well, you've done that very well today for us, Clarafrancie, and I'm going to bring our formal discussion to a close